Before and during World War I, Austria-Hungary was very famous for being the greatest military power in Europe. Wait, no, they were famous for being the worst and most outdated military of all time. Failed Austro-Hungarian military modernization can be traced to the bureaucratic prevention of funds to be sent into improved military forces and the stagnation of arms and equipment. For example, artillery had not been updated since 1889, and in 1905 a prototype armored car was tested for the Austro-Hungarian General Staff, but production on it was cancelled after motorized vehicles scared the Emperor's horse. Let me just say that again. Austria-Hungary did not build armored cars because they scared the Emperor's horse. Seriously, did Austria-Hungary just want to lose World War I or something? Austro-Hungarian inventor Gunther Bernstein actually created the first modern tank in 1911, calling it the motor artillery, as his design had a swiveling naval artillery gun on an armored vehicle. Although his tank design was the most advanced of its kind and was one of the most advanced tank designs even compared to those built in World War I, neither the Austro-Hungarian Empire nor the German Empire ever bought these designs, and a prototype was never built. The empires wanted Bernstein to fund the project himself, and obviously one dude cannot build a tank division on his own, so the project never came to be. But what if in an alternate timeline, Austria-Hungary actually funded the creation of tanks in 1911 for World War I? Just note this video is not about if the Austro-Hungarian military was properly modernized or even led, but it is about if they got tanks. With that, some conditions that are going to need to be changed to give Austria-Hungary tanks would be if the empire either had more bureaucratic efficiency, but come on, this is the Austro-Hungarians, so the only changed condition will be that the empire actually funds the creation of the tank project, and not due to wasting money on BS aristocratic spending. The empire will actually fund the project and still deal with the stagnation of the economy. When World War I comes around, the invasion of Serbia still goes the same as it did in our timeline, because tanks are not going to be very effective to use against the Serbian mountains. Also, the Austro-Hungarians invaded Serbia under the command of the infinitely stupid Konrad von Hotzendorf that it was almost comedic how bad the invasion went. First of all, the trains throughout the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire went the same speed as the slowest train, which was about 4 miles an hour, and the entire military spoke a bunch of different languages. So if having poor equipment from the last century and slow trains wasn't enough, half of the army couldn't understand what their officers were saying. However, where these World War I proto-panzers are useful is on the Eastern Front. Tanks in 1914 will be successful against the Russians, and Austria-Hungary takes the offensive with Germany after Russia fails and the Galicia offensive at the start of the war. Regardless of any idiotic commands by the Austro-Hungarian General Staff, tanks are going to terrify the Russian army, and I feel like tanks would make Russia's 1914 offensive into Galicia probably a failure. Therefore, there is no siege of Przemysl, which was basically Austria-Hungary's Stalingrad, so hundreds of thousands of men are not wasted there. Other 1914 battles, such as the Vistula River, would not occur, as Russia is transferring more divisions to the Austro-Hungarian front, as they are seen as more of a legitimate threat. Russia is unlikely to launch the Brusilov offensive to try to force Austria-Hungary out of the war in 1916, as early on in the war the Austro-Hungarians have held their lines and begun incursions into Poland with the Germans in 1914. But let me be clear, just because Austria-Hungary is performing like an average great power doesn't mean that everything will be all sunshines and rainbows within the empire. Oh no, things just aren't as bad as they were in our timeline. There is less German diversion to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but that might end up being a bad thing in the long run, as German General Mackensen and other German officers were able to effectively command the Austro-Hungarian troops in the Eastern Front in our timeline, and Austro-Hungarian leadership for the most part sucked. Germany would probably look at Austria-Hungary in this alternate timeline and assume that all is well, at least temporarily, and it's good enough for them to fight for themselves. This could cause the Russians to launch an alternate offensive against the Austro-Hungarians in 1917, such as the Kerensky offensive, to break their lines as hard as the Brusilov offensive had done in our timeline, which might prolong Russia for remaining in the war for a while, but all of that is beyond my ability to accurately predict, as we don't know what all would change within the front lines. The Italian front is likely unaffected by the Austro-Hungarian tanks because of mountain warfare, so the Austro-Hungarians stick to what they're good at, which is beating the moronic Luigi Cadorna at the Isonzo River. Would Austria-Hungary having the most advanced tanks in the world turn the entire tide of the war and cause the Central Powers victory in World War I? Well, it's possible. On the one hand, British tanks first used at the Battle of the Somme in 1916 were mechanically ineffective, and tanks were not the decisive blow that the British were hoping for in their early deployment that year. but they would revolutionize modern warfare as a giant steel beast terrified German lines when they were first used. On the other hand, Austria-Hungary has more advanced tanks and has had them since 1911, so tanks are even more improved. I'd say that the war would definitely be more up in the air about who will win, especially after Germany adopts tanks and the designs from the Austro-Hungarians as well. The Russian Revolution probably still happens and Russia drops out of the war, but there are a lot of uncertain factors that could change, such as if Austro-Hungarian leadership is still in command of the Austro-Hungarian army and is so stupid that Russia lands a decisive blow in their months of desperation, which could impact the entire course of the war as well. Also, who knows what would happen with Allied adoption of Austro-Hungarian captured tanks. Now, I'm not 100% sure who would win this alternate World War I, but one possible outcome for if the Central Powers were victorious is that Austria-Hungary is a dominant military power and the empire is held together through technological advancements and the military, which survives in the 1920s, but there are lots of issues such as nationalist movements against the exhausted empire because although winning is a boost to morale, the war would use up a lot of resources and most importantly, cost the lives of many men for so little gain. So the empire would likely fall in the mid-late 1920s, however the world has had so much change to it that the outcomes in this alternate fall of Austria-Hungary would be too difficult for me to predict, but, it's the Balkans, so think what you want about that. But that is all just one possible scenario for if Austria-Hungary had tanks in World War I. What do you think would have happened? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching.